Hello and welcome to the Creabea Knitting Podcast. Hi, my name's Rebecca. I'm a knitter and knitwear designer based in Edinburgh, and here on YouTube I chat a little bit about what I'm knitting and what I'm designing, and I'm doing something a little bit different today and talking to you about what my design calendar, I guess, looks like for the upcoming 6-8 months or so. Normally I do a podcast every second week, and I wanted to sit down today and do something a bit different. I was going to show you all of my designs that I have ever designed. However, we are home with a sick puppy. He got a tooth extracted yesterday. And so he's just lying in his little sun puddle on the floor with his big cone on, and he's got a little swollen face because he's taken a reaction to something, and so I'm just gonna do something nice and quiet and chill, and showing all my designs would require me like to change and show everything, so we're not gonna do that. I'm also not wearing any knits today, one because it's a little bit toasty, and two, I don't like wearing my knits around the puppy because if he gets a tooth in it or he ruins it, I'll be upset, and it's not fair to put that on him. So I'm only wearing t-shirts around him, but I am wearing my Rhinebeck tee, which I don't think I've ever shown on the podcast. I bought this last year when I went to Rhinebeck, and I love it. It's a really, really soft material. It was not from a yarn company, it was from like a random like pickle stand, I think, and they had these really cool t-shirts. So yeah, it already has a hole in it from one puppy tooth, so I don't feel bad wearing it around him at all. Before I jump into all of my designs, I did want to say that I am currently running a birthday sale. I went live this morning. My birthday is on Monday, today is Saturday. I have 2 days left of my 20s, which is kind of a weird feeling. I don't really mind getting a year older, but there's something strange about leaving a whole decade behind. So yeah, but I have a birthday sale and there is 30% off every single one of my patterns. I only do a sale once a year. It's only a birthday sale, so with very limited exceptions, this is the only time that you will, well, it's the only time you'll ever get a discount on all my patterns, and generally I don't really do any other discounts. So if you want to get any patterns for 30% off, now is a good time to do it. The code is happy birthday to me, all in caps, and you can use it on Ravelry or on Etsy, and I'll put that down below. It will be valid until the end of my birthday, so Monday at midnight BST. We're in summertime right now, BST. So yeah, if you want any of those, it's a good time to go and get them. It's a bit strange. I was quite excited all week about this, but then we took the puppy to the vet yesterday, and so it's all been a bit like, all up in the air. So it's strange that we're doing a birthday, I don't know, I thought it would feel like more of a thing, but the last 24 hours have been a bit wild, so it doesn't really feel that big of a deal. I will be starting my birthday celebrations tonight. Going out for dinner with some friends and then going to see a couple of shows at the Fringe. Today is also the last day of the Edinburgh Festival. So yeah. So what I've got is, I'm going to talk through sort of all of my designs that are coming out that I have fixed. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4. My next 4 designs I have like concrete. And then in between those, I put a little box up on Instagram asking about any questions people had, and so I sort of organised, I've got my laptop open beside me with some notes, and I've sort of organised them accordingly so that I can answer some of those questions. I'm going to see if I can knit while I talk. We'll see. If it's getting too distracting, I'll put it down, but I am very close to finishing the body of my second sample of my kip sweater. I'm on my very last herringbone repeat, and I'm on deadline for this in that I need to get, well, my own self-imposed deadline is that I get the body finished this week, and so we're close. So if I can get the rest of the pattern done while I talk today, that would be quite nice. I also have a cup of tea here, a cup of chai with some milk. This is actually a mug that I got from Amy Palco for my birthday 2 years ago. So first things first, the kip sweater. So kip has been on my needles since I think November last year, and it's coming out September this year. I'll put some pictures up where it feels relevant, so I'll put some pictures of this one. It is this herringbone stitch pattern, and I was really inspired by a lot of like the Gansey style sweaters that are quite popular as of late. So big name designers I can think of, there's the Storm sweater by Petite Knit, there's the, is it Dustland from Stephen West, where it's kind of like a thing and then some pearl bumps and then a thing, and it's kind of like individual designs with like a drop shoulder fit. And I was kind of inspired by those, but I also feel like at this point everyone's done one already. Like there's not really much not new content, but like I don't think I could offer something new to that space. Of course I do this and immediately my stitch count is wrong. This is just typical. Okay, I'm back with a stockinette project. So I was really inspired by those sort of Gansey style sweaters, but I wanted to do something different. But I like the idea of kind of like bands of texture. So I just kind of went looking. I had an idea about herringbone, but I know the actual, like the stitch sort of known as herringbone stitch is a very, very dense fabric, and I don't think it's really great for a sweater. I think it could be cool for like a jacket or something. It's also super labor intensive, so I didn't really like jump at the chance of that one. But I think I found this stitch pattern on YouTube. I have since looked and it's in one of my stitch dictionaries, but it didn't look the same. Like looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what that is, but it didn't look as appealing in the stitch dictionary as it did on YouTube. So I think I saw someone knitting it there, and then the next stage was a lot of swatching. So when I say YouTube, there's a question later about stitch inspiration, but there are quite a lot of YouTube channels that are not often in English, where people are just like knitting little swatches, and I find them firstly fascinating to watch, but I also use them for stitch inspiration quite a lot because I find there's a lot of interesting things there. So yeah, they're always called something like beautiful knit stitch for baby blanket, or like knitting pattern for a men's jumper. Like they just call something like that, and there are channels that have like hundreds of videos. So I really like them. I also really like them when I'm not really feeling very inspired and I just want to do some swatching and sort of get like break my brain out of a space. I find it quite nice to go there, and it kind of like taps in, like pries open the creativity of my brain, sort of taps into that source by doing some swatching. So I found it there. What I did find pretty early on was that my normal stitch, like it was really, the edges of the stitch were really wavy, and that was because the rows were too close together. So I basically just kept swatching and swatching and swatching all the way up until I got to a needle size that worked, and that was a 5mm needle with sport weight yarn, which was just, yeah, I was surprised by that, let's say. But yeah, so that was good. I really liked that one. And then I was also a little bit on the fence about construction. I think the reason for this is that I now have quite a few sweaters with the same construction, which is the trapeze back shaping. So it kind of like, you start with a top and then you increase either edge and then you work flat and then you pick up the shoulders and come round. And that sort of detailing goes down the back shoulder. And I've knit, the stick season was the first one. The Lauder is also that design. The Lanark is, not the Lanark, the Linen is also that design. So I kind of felt like I'd been a little bit maybe like relying on that construction, which I didn't really want to do. So I was kind of like, oh, I don't know about this. And so I started it as a raglan, but I didn't like how it looked across the raglans. And I didn't like that, like it all, I guess I could have done like the front and the back one way and the sleeve the other way, but I just found it a bit confusing. So eventually I decided to go back to that original construction. And what I really loved about it is it allowed me to make this, I'll show you here, the way that I could leave the edges. I could leave one, I wanted to use this technique, this lateral braid edging, in a lot of different things, and I thought it would be really clean on this. But then I got to mirror it quite nicely by just leaving this one single stitch along the edge. So there's nothing special about that. That is just that when I've been increasing at the shoulders for that sort of trapezoid back, I leave 2 stitches either end, and then I pick up on one of the stitches. So there ends up being this one singular stitch, which has just been knit the whole way, and it's not been increased or decreased, just a singular stitch. And so when I pick up the stitches, it just leaves that one stitch, and that looks like this in the final pattern, which I just think really nicely then goes up into the lateral braid for the neck. I wasn't planning to do a lateral braid in the body, but I found that going from the stitch pattern, or on the sleeves, going from the stitch pattern into the ribbing looked really scruffy. So I thought, well, that's fine, I'll just do the lateral braid everywhere. So yeah, I think I had to rip that pattern out quite a few times to get it right. My underarm shaping wasn't quite right, so that took quite a lot of work. It was pulling across the bust, and I was getting these really like sticky out shoulders, and that wasn't at all what I wanted. So that took quite a bit of work to get back to being right again. And then the other issue with that was the top of the sleeves. With these sort of, this drop shoulder design that I've used quite a few times, I do short row shaping in the top of the sleeve, so it's almost like a mini drop shoulder. I think quite often traditional drop shoulders come all the way down to here. This design only comes to like here, but that means that the shoulder ends here and you need to sort of work the sleeve like this so that it runs straight and so it fits properly. And so you work this little like wedge of short rows at the top of each sleeve. And I was worried about how that would work with the stitch pattern, so I kept putting it off. And then one day I was like, I can't think of a way around this, we're just gonna do short rows, and it looked absolutely fine. I was panicking for nothing. It looks great, I like it a lot. So yeah, just an interesting take on construction there. But yeah, the name Kip, Kip is a harbour on the west coast of Scotland, and it also means chicken in Dutch, which I just think is really funny. And Kip was on my list. I've got a list of names that I like, and they're not all like a sign, they're just different ideas. And I like that this was kind of like a Gansey, which is kind of more fisherman-y, and it was a bit more masculine because there's not so much shaping. That's what Kip it is. My original plan was that Kip was going to come out in April. However, sorry, maybe I'm saying a lot, it's because I'm thinking a lot on the spot. It was going to come out in April. However, I knew that in April it needed some work. I knew that the shaping wasn't quite right, and I knew I'd have to rip back, and I didn't think I'd have the time to fix it. And around that time, I was also starting to think about extending my test knits to 12 weeks instead of, I guess they're usually like 9 or 10. And I knew I couldn't get it turned around in the time window to get a full test knit. And I do think there's a little bit of a degree, I think you see it a lot with other designers, where they are kind of like squeezing, this is not a judgmental thing, I completely understand it, where you try and like squeeze a pattern out that's not necessarily seasonal. So April, I think people, like that's probably your, like I like to do like a spring-ish pattern in April that could work for both seasons. But I didn't feel like bringing a whole sweater out in April, especially not in May. Because especially in warmer climates, people are already thinking about summer knits. So I decided to park it and leave it for September. I took maybe like a month off from knitting on it. And I think it was when I was away in New Zealand, I didn't knit on it. And then I came back and was like full force back into knitting on it again. And I'm really pleased with it. I'm really, really excited. I think it's a really clean garment. It reminds me of my Cargill in that it's a relatively labour intensive stitch pattern and not hard, it's just knit to, slip to, the whole garment. But slip stitches, the Cargill also has slip stitches, make your rows quite close together. So there are 40 rows per 10 centimetres, which just means it takes longer, like you have to knit more rows to see progress. And yeah, I just absolutely love it. I also use the same yarn for both samples. Quite often I'll change up the yarn between them both. But because I find the yarn quite affordable and I love the colours, I think I could have still chosen like 4 or 5 more colours I would have happily had a sample out of. So yeah, so where it's at right now, the test knit is almost coming to an end. The pattern will release, I think, Friday the 13th of September. I checked that this week. And I need to work out what to do with photos. I have quite a lot of local testers. I think we have maybe 4 local testers, and so usually that means I speak to Jasmine. But the dates are a little bit tight. The dates to get the pictures are the dates that I'm moving house. So I need to actually message Jasmine and find out if she'd do an evening, and if not, maybe the Sunday. But I think as well with the sun, like there are some people who can do the Sunday, some who can't do the Sunday. So I just need to go back and check those dates. Sam does take some pictures for me, my partner, but we've got puppy right now, which is a lot of work, and moving house. So I think that'll be challenging. And if I have, he does the pictures generally that are just me or me and family. He said like he'd rather people who cut, like testers that come and do it, get like more professional experience with Jasmine, because then they're guaranteed to have good pictures. He takes amazing photos, but I do find with Jasmine we get, you know, we go do an hour and I leave with over 100 photos, which just feels wild. Whereas with Sam we might do an hour and I'll leave with like 10 great photos, and I only need 10 great photos, so it works. But I understand that for people coming and spending some time with me, it's nice for them to get professional pictures at the end. For my photo people that come, they get access to all the pictures professionally, they can do whatever they want with them. And I also started sending them gift cards afterwards. So I just did that for my last pattern for the first time, and I'm going to continue doing that one. It's for Ginger Twist. I like the fact that I can get it from a local yarn store, and it's just a little thank you for giving me their time and giving up an hour to come and model for me. So that's something I'm going to keep doing moving forward. Okay, so that is the Kip. Oh, so my next question between this and the next one is, how do I pick a release date? I have a spreadsheet, I am a product manager, so working to a timeline and to a roadmap is something that I do often in work, and so I find it quite reassuring. I've got all my patterns. I think I've got all the dates up till next year May, and every sort of few months I'll add the dates for the following couple of months. And so what I do is I don't really like to release patterns more than a month together, so generally I'll keep them at least a month apart, and then from there I will pick backwards. And I generally take, so for example, I released one in July, but I don't have any, like I don't have anything coming out in August, so I just picked mid-September, and I think that was like, when's the pattern ready by, etc. And how do I get myself 12 weeks? Well, I'll do it mid-September. So then just about every pattern that comes out from there on outwards is every 4 weeks, from there onwards until December. So mid-September, mid-October, mid-November, mid-December. So I mark that date that it's going to release, and then I plan 12 weeks back, and then I plan an additional 6 to 8 weeks before that, which is my own sample knitting time. And it means that I can see, like, okay, when should I cast a sample on by? And it also means that I can tell my tech editor when to expect patterns from me. My tech editor is incredible, but she is currently so busy that she has a waiting list. So I just want to make sure that she knows what's coming and that our expectations between each other are super, super clear. I think there was another question about, yeah, this was the same one, like, when do I decide what comes out when? Generally, I think there are some months that it can be anything. So like September, October can be just about anything. February, March can be just about anything. I think, for example, my wrap that I'll talk about a little bit later, that felt like something people could knit for Christmas or for New Year. So I wanted to make sure it's out early enough for that. And then something with like a, you know, anything that's like worsted or Aran weight, I want to be releasing it pretty much like deep, like late autumn or deep winter, because it feels very like relevant for the season. I think people in January, when it's freezing cold outside, want to be knitting big heavy cozy sweaters. Whereas in September, you're starting to get into sweater season, but you're probably still okay with like a DK weight, a lighter weight pattern. I think there's an argument, and some people definitely like to knit for the season ahead. So people start knitting their summer knits in like February, but I'm not that person. I am all about the vibes, and I want to knit the thing now, and if I can't wear it now, I'll just wear it when it's cold enough. And so the stuff that I'm knitting now, I guess I technically knit for the next season because I'm designing, but yeah, I generally think about like what would the knitter want to be knitting on during that part of the year, and try to release accordingly. But generally, my brain, I think of basically having a monthly slot and working out what sort of thing should come out then. So I know that I'm going to have like a cardigan, traditional lace cardigan coming out in April, which I've done the last 2 years, not really on purpose, just that it feels like the right time to release that kind of pattern. Okay, so my next pattern is the Nyx. Nyx is an all over colourwork sweater. I'll put a picture up. This is a collaboration with Explorer Knits and Fibres. We worked together last year on 6th season. We're working together again today, right now. And what can I tell you about it? So I have wanted to do a round yoke sweater for a while, and I think colourwork and round yoke work really well together. I also wanted to do an all over colourwork design, but I knew that not everybody would want to knit all over colourwork. And so I wanted it to be something that both the yoke and it would work as a yoke only pattern, but it would work as a whole body pattern. And I really love this. It's a nice, I think a lot about what I like to knit. I don't really want to knit an all over fingering weight sweater, so it's a relatively chunky gauge. I think it's 20 stitches, which means yes, it's all over colourwork, but it's not too laborious. And yeah, you can just pick the yoke version if that's something you want to do. You just want like a flash of colourwork. It also just means the pattern is a bit more versatile, and people might use it more than once if there's more than one option. What else to say about this one? Interesting things about this. Oh, something that's interesting in terms of the designing of this. So the yoke, it's the yoke of the sweater. So the body length from the underarm to the hem is the same for all sizes, and that's something I just choose to do in my patterns because I think it's usually pretty modifiable. My sleeve lengths are all the same and my body lengths are all the same. That is not to say that I think everyone's got the same length torso or everyone's got the same length arms, but I think it does mean that those things aren't dictated by your chest size. So you could be 5'2", or you could be 5'8", and have exactly the same chest size, and so you wouldn't expect, like, there's no reason for that size to have a size just for that one, and that's something I've done from day one. But for the sweater, for the knit sweater, the yoke is still different. So even though underarm to hem is the same, back of neck to hem will be different because the yoke is deeper on some sizes, and it's not a massively big difference. There's usually like from the smallest to the largest size, maybe like 6 or 7 centimeters. But what's interesting with the knits is that you, the colourwork chart ends at a certain part for somebody, but you have to knit the rest of it. So it was an interesting thing to work out. How do you make sure that sizes with a deeper yoke still have a full length sweater? So that was a fun challenge. And the other interesting challenge was that the sleeves are obviously longer. So how do you adjust, how do you add to the body colour, the body motif in a seamless way to extend the sleeves? So it's quite interesting. There are 2 charts. There's a yoke only chart, and then there is a full body chart, and then there's a sleeve chart. So basically for the sleeves, you're going to work, for the body, you're going to work the whole body chart. And for the sleeves, you're going to work the whole body chart, and then this extra chunk of 20 rows or something to make the sleeve 10 centimeters longer. So yeah, that was something fun about knits. First time designing round yoke and first time doing that much colour work. In my colour work in the past, this is my 3rd colour work sweater. I've done Rue, which was a contiguous construction, and Care, which is a drop shoulder construction, and all of them had bands of colour work. And this was a wedge method, so you start here and you have to work increases in the pattern, and that definitely fried my brain a little bit, but I really liked it. It was really interesting, and I'd like to do it again in the future, definitely. I think it's a fun way to do things, and I think it works really nicely for round yokes. I mean, in an ideal world, if you have bands of colours in round yokes, you do the band and then you do an increase round and then you do the band. But yeah, I still find it really interesting. And it makes me really want to do a round yoke sweater with like a 1x1 colourwork chest, like yoke, sorry. I do think there's a lot of 1x1 out there, like it's a relatively common thing to do, but there's a chunk of the knits that has 1x1 colourwork, and it's so fun to knit. Like, it's quite quick and it's really moorish, so it makes me want to do that again in the future. So the question after next was, how do I organise my design notes? So my general process is that I have an A4 square paper ring notepad. I was going to go find it, but I don't know where it is and I don't want to disturb the puppy too much. I use it to note down everything. So it's got like, it'll have like customer interviews from work on one page, and then it'll have a sketch of a yoke design on the next page. And I like the fact that it's just all in one place and I just take it everywhere with me. I never used to take physical notes. It's quite a new thing to me, but this one's really working for me, and I have found keeping it all in one place does make my life easier. Nothing stays on paper for too long, so it's fine. Like, I don't need to refer back to it. I just need to get the ideas out of my head at the time. And I'm almost at the end. This is my first one, and I've had it for maybe 2 months, and I've got the next one ready to go. So I think I've got like 2 pages left of this, which is kind of exciting. So I do a lot of drawing and do a lot of like sketching of numbers. I'm quite a visual person, so in order to understand how a construction is going to work or how I want to do something, I find that drawing it out makes my life a lot easier. So I do keep it there, and then what I try to do pretty early on, usually like all the development part is writing down notes and doing some swatches, and nothing really gets formalised until I have that ready. And then once I'm happy with a gauge, and from there on pretty much I will open a Word doc or a Google doc on my laptop, and I will write down my early notes. So that will usually just say, if there's like a link to like a stitch pattern, or I've got a picture of a stitch pattern, I might copy that in. Otherwise it'll say gauge, and then it'll say like cast on X number of stitches, or like cast on 105, increase both ends 42 rows, work 10 centimeters. Like, that's just completely, yeah, very much what that could look like. And it's enough to get me started, and then I'll go back and clean up the pattern later as I'm writing. If I get to a bit that's complex, where I need to make a note of what I'm doing on every single row, I will try. I'm not always very good at it, which can cause me problems, but I'm definitely better at it than I used to be. I will sit down if I know that part's coming. So a great example is my wrap cardigan. It has this little wedge of short rows. If you can see, my shoulder, this is not straight, this goes up the way. And so the wrap is all about like perfect fit, like that was the goal. And so in order to have this work, instead of this just being a flat shoulder, there's a little tiny wedge of colour work that makes, sorry I keep saying colour work, short rows, that means that this part is high, there's more fabric here, and it's literally, you work like this little bit for like 3 or 4 rows, but I needed to write that down as I did it. So as I did the shoulder, I wrote it down, like line by line, did the row, typed up, did the row, typed it up. And then that's the pattern that will go to my tech editor. And then the final pattern's usually in the same document, like usually she just works on that document too. That gets shared with my testers. So everything I do is on Google Docs. I really love it because it means that I'm never sitting waiting for feedback at the end of the test knit, because everything is coming live. It also means that I don't have to keep telling testers like, oh, there's a new version, here's a new version, here's a new version, because it's a live document. So usually what I'll do is I'll update the colours. If there's been a change of numbers, I'll put colours, and if people are still, like if there's an instruction that's going to be slightly clearer, I might like put the old instructions in brackets so that that's really clear. But I really like this method. I would not change this. I mean, unless something really great came along, but it's one of the parts I really like about it. And it means that the feedback form then goes out like midway through the test, and I have quite a few sizes for every, and that means that all I'm really waiting for is any fit, like end fit feedback. But I really feel like I've never had a situation where I've gotten to the end of the test knit and I've had like feedback that I wasn't expecting, because it's always come up before then. And yardage, and I can adjust yardage up until the night before the pattern goes out, or like the morning of even. So if I'm like, if I realise that all 3 size 1s use 200 meters less, then I can change that. That doesn't require, I don't have to go back through my tech editor to do that. That's something I can do. And then generally that document gets all commented on throughout the test knit. I'll usually have that document, if someone flags something and says, I'm stuck on this, can you fix it? Then that gets done immediately. Otherwise I'll open it like once every 3 or 4 days, oh, once every day at the start of the test, and then by the end of the test like once a week. And it kind of, it starts every day, it finishes once a week, and it goes down to like once every 2 days, once every 4 days, once every week. And then the very final document gets put into my final template. And I will say that is one part of the process that I have sometimes had issues with, in that I've copied something over and like missed a section. It's happened to me twice. But I've made 19 patterns, so that is a relatively high fail rate. Once I forgot a section for a size and I had to send an update, and once I forgot like the rest of the body instructions. I mean, when I say I forgot, it's in the original document, it's been tested, and I've just not copied and pasted that part over. So it's definitely something to check. And then the pattern goes live. So those are all the places I document along the way. And I guess sometimes I come back and look at videos to check, like sometimes I'll check podcasts to see what I've said about things, but not very often. Like I've done that maybe twice ever. Okay, next is coming out in October, mid-October. My next pattern then is my Cara wrap, which is what I'm currently knitting on, sample number 2. And this, for me, so I mentioned before, I went to my mum's wedding in Australia in April, and I wore a very strappy dress, and I loved the idea of knitting a wrap cardigan to wear over it. In hindsight, the wedding was in Brisbane, it was hot and sticky, and I did not need a wrap cardigan, but I still knit one. And I knit it and I was like, I really like this. This is, and it wasn't really, I guess when you're a designer, like everything you knit has potential to become a design, but this wasn't really meant to become a design. It was really just like a knit this thing for this occasion, and I really could not find what I wanted. I wanted a set-in sleeve, and I wanted a relatively like a lower neck. Like I want to be able to wear it without a camisole underneath, but I wanted it to be still feel very secure around the neck. I feel like I've seen pictures of wraps where like someone's very obviously pinned it, and I was like, I don't want that for sure. And what else? I wanted it to be quite fitted. I didn't really want to put a hole in it. Like for the wrap, I kind of wanted it to have like a somehow different way of being secured. And there were some that I wasn't against, but the sizing was really poor, like 1 or 2 sizes. So, and I don't buy patterns unless they're size inclusive. So I was like, well, here's a fun challenge. Let me try and work that out myself. And I've done a lot of sewing in the past, and I've sewn a lot of wrap dresses, and I spent a lot of time perfecting the wrap dress to fit me. I will say, I've probably changed sizes since then. I'm not sure that would, like, out of the packet still fit me in the way it used to. like my old block. But I kind of understood a lot about wraps and coverage and gaping and those sorts of things. So what was really interesting is I knit 3 samples of this before, well, my third sample was the one I liked. The first sample was then the one that I took to Australia, and there were a couple, well, I didn't take it, the one I knit for Australia. So first and foremost, it was bottom up, which I just don't think knitters like bottom up as much. There are some designs, like my Santa cardigan was bottom up. I'm sure I'll have more designs in future that are bottom up, but I don't think this one, I feel like with a wrap, especially when I wanted to hit the waist, I want you to be able to try it on as you go down and make adjustments as you go. So it being top down was important, so I knew I had to change that. The armholes were also too deep and I had some like bagging at the armholes, and the back neck flopped out. Like it wasn't tight to my neck, it was like flopping and it was too low. And then I used a knit one, like a sort of ribbed edge, like a knit purl knit, and it was way too loose. Now I will say I ran some elastic through it and now it fits really well, but I didn't want the pattern to have to rely on elastic. I wanted it to be a good fit as is, and if you want to add elastic you can. And so that's how I felt about it. So I started again, and I started over in the yarn that I'm currently using, but what I found is that my pre-blocking gauge, it's alpaca and mohair, and once I blocked it with a lot more fabric on it, the gauge dropped a lot, and so my numbers were way off. So then I started again, and I will say even my third one, which is my now final my actual sample, I worked on the neck edge, I think I worked it out 3 or 4 times, and so what I now have is 4 different increase rates along this neck edge. So you start by not increasing, and then you increase like every second row, and then every row, and then yeah, every 4th row, every 2nd row, every row. So like this gets coverage, and so it goes all the way over, but it still hits you in the place you want to get hit. The place you want it to hit. So that took a lot of maths, but it was, once I cracked it, I was like, this is amazing. What else did I really like about that one? It has really, yeah, the short rows at the edging is really lovely, and it's got really nice back short rows, which both of them I really like. It's got a set-in sleeve, which is brand new construction. I think something I made very early before I ever considered designing was the set-in sleeve, but it was from the bottom up, and then I seamed the sleeves on. So that was, yeah, it was generally brand new construction to me. It's pretty similar to my drop shoulder sleeve cap, it's just a bit more fitted. So I knew the concept of like working a sleeve cap, it's just I worked more of a sleeve cap. And the ties I think are really sweet. So you do a little I-cord tie on the inside and a little I-cord tie on the outside. And I really like that one. I think it's a very clean way to do it, as opposed to, yeah, having to like put knit like a slit in the side or like sew on a ribbon. Like I don't have to do any of that. So that was really nice. So my first version, yeah, I want it to be kind of festive. So my first version is in Santa's Garn Pure Gint and mohair, Santa's Garn mohair. I will say it's not the softest. So I'm very excited. My second one is the alpaca, and I know that my post blocking gauge for this is now what's in the pattern. So when I first did it, I thought it was going to be like 24 rows, and then after blocking it got to 28 rows, but the pattern is 28 rows. So this time will be the right gauge. And hopefully, when I did the first one, like the crossing was like almost at my navel, which as you can imagine is not really the look I was going for. So yeah, I picked this one to come out when it's coming out because I thought it'd be really nice for Christmas and for New Year's, and yeah, just a little bit like it's more of a fancy one, and it's very fitted. It also has bust shaping and waist shaping, so yeah, and like a little bit of like just little sprinkles of short rows in all the right places and sprinkles of shaping to hopefully make this something that really fits the way you want it to fit, which is really nice. So this is my second sample. It's going to have some waist shaping and it's going to be a longer length. So my first one hits right on the waist, and this one is going to have some, like the ribbing ends up being longer, and it's going to hit me like more at my hips, so I can wear it like over some jeans. I think it's going to look really classy. And so yeah, my question here for Cara, well, my question after this was how to pick the right yarn. I don't know. You will find out later when I show my swatches. It takes me a lot of yarns to find out what I want. Some of them are like a non-issue. So I knew that I wanted Cara, the wrap, to be mohair and fingering because I wanted that sort of like soft, fluffy feel. I wanted it to be mohair. the pattern can be knit in a DK, so if you're not into that, it's fine, but I knew that that was the vibe I was going for. Cables I find particularly challenging to find something that really pops. So generally I just swatch and find out what I like. I have some bucket list yarns that I really want to try, and I have some yarns in stash that I will always, like, I bought some DK Sock Hill at Rhinebeck last year, and I think I swatched it like 5 times just to see, like, oh, is this the pattern it could work for? And so far I've not found it. So sometimes I know the yarn completely, sometimes I'll go through stash, and sometimes I'll think, okay, for example, a swatch I'll show later is in Jensen from Isager, and I just wanted to try that combination for a while. So I swatched with it. I also have quite a lot of yarns that I just, okay, the door went, but Sam's getting it, so it's fine. I keep a lot of single skeins of yarn, which are really for swatching purposes. So I have like 1 skein of this and 1 skein of that, and maybe I have like a couple of colours of it, but that is, like, I would say be 20% of my yarn stash is single skeins that are already skeined up, that are just for swatching. Which I really like. I think it makes a lot of sense for me to do it that way. It is a bit more cost efficient because it means that, yes, I have, yes, I've got a lot of individual skeins, but it means I'm not buying sweater quantities without being sure of what it's going to become. That being said, like last week or 2 weeks ago, I think I ordered like 7 individual skeins of different yarns because I was just like, I want to try this, I want to try this, I want to try this. So that was quite fun. And I guess when you have a business in yarn design and all of your yarn purchases are business expenses, you can justify making those decisions. Cool, so my next and final design that is currently completely firm and like set out and planned is the Stick Season jacket. So Stick Season is a pattern I brought out last year. It was my Exploring Knits and Fibres collaboration last year, and it's one of my favourite patterns. I love it. I love the fit. I think it's a real classic sweater, and almost every time I see one on someone tags me in it, I think, oh, I love that pattern. But I was thinking about, I don't remember, I think it must have hit me, like, I keep thinking I was on public transport when I thought about this. Oh, we have an awake puppy. He's going for a little lie down. Are you going on the sofa? You coming to say hi? Hey Bobby. You wanna come up? Wanna come up? Oh, I should move my swatches out of the way. You're gonna go lie on your beds. Okay. Good boy. He's got such a swollen little face. See him. Hey Bobby. Poor guy. I think he's got he's taken an allergic reaction to something, so he's had some steroids this morning and he's gonna have some antihistamine this afternoon, but oh, just feeling a bit sorry for him. Anyway, that was a digression. Yeah, I think I was on, like, I remember distinctly being like a bus or on a train and thinking like, I should make a jacket. And it's an interesting one for me because something I am big on is giving variations to my patterns and like giving lots of options. So part of me is like, oh, if I make the same pattern in a different gauge, I need to really, like, it's a cardigan, but the cardigan part is a pretty simple part to work out. I need to make sure that I'm really adding value here and I'm not just releasing the pattern in a different gauge. Like, how do I make sure it's pattern plus? And so this one has a couple of options. Firstly, so the original pattern is 20 stitch gauge and this is a 16 stitch gauge, so it's for a different weight of yarn, and there are a bunch of variations. So it's going to have a v-neck and a round neck option. It's going to have a shawl collar, a round collar and a jacket collar. It's going to have regular cuffs and folded cuffs, and it's going to have pockets. So just a couple of options you can pick through, and yeah, I'm really excited about it. Oh, and there's like a longer, like a full, like a waist length, and then like a full, almost like tunic length. So I'm really excited about this one. I have wanted to cast it on like as soon as I had the idea, and I was just waiting and waiting and waiting. My first sample is done. I can put a picture up. It is in Studio Donegal soft tweed, soft Donegal. And I'm a big fan. I like it a lot. And it's kind of, I'm like playing that chicken game this week of like, is it cold enough to wear an Aran weight cardigan? Is it not? It's not a super thick yarn, so I've gotten away with it a few days. But I'm really pleased, and I'm working on my second sample. Oh, and that's the other thing. The Stick Season has this like texture on the yoke, and for this version there's no texture, there's yoke texture, or there's full texture. So that's really cool. I'm currently knitting an all over texture tunic length shawl collar version for my mum, and I'm knitting it in Rama Vams, which is a new to me yarn, and I love it. I really really like the yarn, and it was one of those times where you just come across a yarn and you're like, this is amazing, I want to use this for everything. So my question for, is there much more to say about sixth season? I don't think so. I was just really thinking, like, imagine it's like snowy outside, or it's like really chilly, and you want the sort of thing that's going to keep all the wind off you, and you just feel cozy and warm, and it's like thick and outdoorsy. That's what I was, and I also wanted it to be something that you didn't feel precious about, that you could just like chuck on, and I think I've nailed it. But it was very like vibes driven. And the question here, oh, somebody expressly asked, will you design an oversized cozy long sweater? This is it. It is not a sweater, it is a cardigan, but this is as close as I've come so far to oversized long cozy sweater. So somebody asked about how I decide on my variations. So I have patterns with a lot of variations. I think my most varied is my Lauder. It was a cable sweater that came out in March. It is a sweater, a cardigan and a vest, and it has v-neck and round neck. So technically it is 6 patterns for the price of one. And ultimately my decision is how much do I have to vary the base pattern to make this work, and how do I make sure it's still a coherent pattern despite having plenty of options. And so that's kind of the, actually I say that it's probably the Lauder. Oh, there's also the Toaster Tank, which is 2 different gauges, 3 different shapes. So camisole, square neck and vest. So there are actually a couple that are really really heavily varied. Varied? I don't know what word I'm looking for, but one of those words. I have a few patterns with many options, and yeah, so basically my major thought is like, is this still one pattern? Like, does it still make sense for this to be one pattern? And if there's a point where you are knitting in the exact same way, but just a little bit of the patterns change, like that to me becomes one pattern. So if you're following the exact same instructions, then it's the same pattern. And so that is kind of, yeah, I feel like with my winter garments, gauge is just, they're all the same gauge. Like adding a different gauge makes it kind of a different pattern. But for summer, I like to add 2 gauges. So with my Lunan polo came out, it's a polo and a tee, and it came out in 4-ply and DK, and that is because the DK weight makes sense for me in the summer because I live in Scotland, but I know that fingering or 4-ply makes much more sense to other people in summer. So I've kind of started to lean into 2 gauge options for summer. Not saying I'll always do it, but I am for now, because I think it means it suits more climates. Like, I think the warmest day we had here for summer was like 22 degrees Celsius. I can wear DK t-shirts on those days. So yeah, I really, like, that's why there's multiple variations on that one. But yeah, I guess in my head I kind of think that, like, if there's like so if the pattern, like pattern A, like variation A is like this and variation B is like this, and if they're just the same and that one just goes like this and comes back, it's the same pattern. Or like if they start here and then they still, like this, maybe not, but like this, it's the same pattern. I don't know. I know there are designers there who like will release the same pattern and just add stripes and call it a new pattern, and absolutely props to them. They're allowed to do whatever they want with their own intellectual property. For me, I think I get a lot of goodwill, and I think it makes no difference to me, right? Like, I have a full-time job. I am not relying on my income. It's a lovely income to have. I think it's one of the reasons that we could buy a house was because I've sold knitting patterns, which is really, really cool. But I'm not relying on it. And so for me, what I want to make sure is people get as much bang for their buck out of my patterns. And I think people will consistently buy my patterns more often because I offer so much value for money. And I think some people who wouldn't necessarily have bought a pattern will buy it because they'll think, oh well, I'm getting 6 patterns for one, I may as well buy it. And so I try to add as many as possible. I do try to make sure it's not too complicated. So when it comes to stick season, the base pattern is the same for every single version. What I will end up doing is having a round neck and a V-neck, because those are some, like, they have different shaping here. And then cuffs is just like knit to length 1 or length 2 and fold over. Collar is like, here's collar option 1, collar option 2, or collar option 3, and it's going to take up like half a page. So I don't really, it doesn't get too complicated. And then ideas for variations, just, I don't know what, I talk about how when I first started designing, I thought I only had one idea for a pattern and then they just started like flowing. And it feels a bit like that with variations. It feels like now, just about every thought I have, I'm like, oh, I could do this. Oh, I could add this. And it doesn't seem to happen before I start casting on. But once I've started going, I feel the variations start appearing in my head. But I don't feel like every pattern has to have variations. If it's a really solid pattern, I'm happy just like kip. Kip will just be kip. There is one instruction, everyone's got the same, and that makes sense. So not everything will have options, but I think that where I can add them, I think that in the sewing, I did a lot more sewing before I did knitting, and in the sewing community, pattern hacks is really common, where people take a pattern and they like adjust things. And a lot of pattern companies will show hacks and they'll bring together series, and that's a big deal. And I think I'm kind of inspired by that, where it adds value to a pattern if you can make more than one outfit out of it. And so if I can do that with knitting, I think that's pretty cool too. Cool, so where are we at? My laptop has died, which is probably a sign that I'm talking too much. Okay, so a few questions before I get into my swatches. The biggest one is where I get inspiration from. Ready to wear, if I'm honest. There are designers out there who are coming up with incredibly unique, incredibly special artwork of knits. I'm not saying my knitting's not art, but I'm saying that my knitting is day-to-day wardrobe that's elevated and interesting and fun to knit. So I kind of want to be knitting what people in the street are wearing, just a knitted version. And other people will not agree with that one, but that is completely fine. That's just my aesthetic. So I definitely like to find ready-to-wear garments. I like to take inspiration from traditional knitwear. I think a lot of my patterns are fairly timeless. I think that they're like drop shoulders having a moment right now, so I think that they're quite like a lot of drop shoulder patterns because that's what's on trend. But I think generally I don't lean too heavily into trends, and I like to knit things that I think this will fit into a lot of wardrobes. This could be worn a lot of different ways. This could be styled a whole lot of different ways, and this is fun to knit. So sometimes my inspiration comes from this swatch first. Like I knit a swatch and then I'm like, yep, that's gonna become da 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 da. Sometimes I've seen a finished garment and I've thought, I'm gonna make that. I'm gonna knit a pattern out of that. And I think that sometimes that can be a bit funky because like it's still a garment that someone else has designed. So it's always like a bit of a strange one, but usually what I find is that if I start off thinking, wow, that's a really cool end sweater, I want to make something like that, my brain takes me off a different route on the way, and so it ends up looking like a very different piece at the end than it could have done based on the inspiration that I started with. And then there's a question about my stitch inspiration. So I've already mentioned YouTube. I like that a lot. I also use stitch dictionaries. My favourite one is the Harmony guides. I've actually just ordered, I was looking at my stitch dictionaries for this, so that I could answer this question, and I decided I got them all as PDFs, but I decided I would really like, let me see if I've got my other one open, but I don't think I do. No, I don't. What I really like is being able to, they're on PDFs, which I quite like, but in the new house I'm going to have my own office, and I ordered all four Harmony guides. I only ever use volume 2, weirdly, it's the one that I had. But I've ordered volume 1 to 4 as secondhand copies. So I quite like stitch dictionaries. I recently bought the Nora Gone Cable book. So like I'll quite often just have a look at what's out there. I'm not a huge fan of the Japanese one, only because everyone's used it. And like there are only so many times that a sweater can be designed with the same Japanese cable and still be interesting and different. So generally no. I also I do have some interesting stitches, but I also just like interesting details in plain stockinette sometimes as well. Just depends. And I do have like a folder on my phone saved of details and things like that. I tend to organise things on Pinterest. I find it's a really nice visual place, and I like that the algorithm gives me suggestions for more things. And so like for example, the lateral braid on the kit, I had a video saved on on Instagram of someone else doing that lateral braid, and it's been saved on my phone for like a year before I used it. And I have at least 50 more of those like little techniques, little details that sometimes I think this needs something, but I don't know what it is. Let's go and have a look and see what's out there and have a look through my folders of inspiration. So I feel like this is already a long video, But my last thing to talk about is some swatches. I am currently like heavy in development mode, so thinking a lot about the future, which is wild given that I have my next 4 patterns planned. But I think because of this like 12-week thing, like where I'm doing swatches over, sorry, I'm doing pattern test knits over 12 weeks, it feels like I need to be ahead of the game a bit more. The next thing I want, those are my patterns for September, October, November, December. I need to, if I want to release a pattern in January, I should be casting it on like this week and next week. And so like I'm trying to narrow down what that could be. I think I know what it's going to be. I think I'm going to cast it on today. But this is, last time I podcast I said I had 15 swatches. It's definitely more than that now. But this is what my current situation looks like, and I thought I would just show you some of them. So let me start with my ribbed swatches, because that's the one that I'm casting on next. I have forever wanted to knit what I've been calling a varied rib sweater, with the idea being it's like one type of rib and then another type of rib. And so where did I start? I started here, I think, with this one. And I was trying to decide if I wanted like a little gap between them or just purl bumps. And then I made a mega swatch. Because again, I was trying to decide if I just wanted like like a little bit or a big chunk of stitches between. And then by the end of my mega swatch, I knit continental, but I was doing combination purling in the round. So in the round, I don't have anything to show, it's got it. My ribbing is really, really neat because I purl the other way. There's a western purl and an eastern purl, and I do like 1 and it makes for very, very neat 1x1 ribbing. But I didn't do this, I just did it flat, and mind my 1x1 ribbing is pretty scruffy, if I'm honest. So then I was like, maybe I just not do 1x1 ribbing. So then I did this, which is 3x1 and 2x2, and I loved it. So this bottom part of the swatch is what I'm going to go ahead with. And then, this isn't that, is it? No, that's cables. And then I wanted to experiment with, so then I was like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And I knew this is the yarn I was going to use. So I knit a swatch in the yarn. And then I also wanted to work out, so I was going to do this as a drop shoulder. And then I was like, this would be a cool raglan. Let's make it a raglan. I don't know why, it's like a raglan. So it's going to be a raglan. And so I had hiccups. I wanted to work out how to do increases. So my original plan was to do them on the purls. I don't like it. I think it's messy. So this is what it looks like with the raglan at the knits. And I like it a lot. So my current state of this is I have 3 swatches. It's not written up, it's in my notepad. I have my notepad. Oh, the other reason I knit this swatch is because I wanted to see how long each section should be. And that helped me determine for a yoke depth that the numbers I was working was going to work out. So I currently know the whole yoke, which honestly, actually I pretty much have this pattern done. And it is like 5 lines. So I know exactly my yoke depth, I know what I'm casting on, I know what's going to become front, back and sleeves, I know my short rows, and I know what my stitch count needs to be at the bust when I finish. So, and I know how many rows it's going to take me to get to there. And then at that point I just split for sleeves and I'll just go for it. So this pattern is ready to go, which is kind of ridiculous given that this is how much knitting I've done. I will almost certainly come across things in the process that I need to adjust, but that's where I'm at, I'm ready to go. My plan is to cast it on and take it with me to the shows this evening, because the first part is going to be a 1x1 rib collar and that should just be 1x1 rib. I am deciding if I'm going to do a high collar or like a more like shallow collar. I think for this one, yeah, it's a little scratchy. This is a Fivel from Rauma, and I really like it a lot. It's not scratchy to me. It's definitely more of like an outerwear sweater than like a super cozy soft sweater, but I still like that. And I think I like the idea of it being a slightly higher neck. My second version is going to be in navy blue. I think Santa's Carn Peer Gynt and mohair, and I think maybe that one I'll have a folded collar. And what I also could do is there aren't going to be short rows in the collar because it's top down. I'm going to start with the collar first. What I might do is make a double collar, and I can decide afterwards if I want to fold it or not. So that's ready to cast on. It is a thicker weight sweater. I think it's a 16 stitch gauge, the same as the stick season. So I want to make this for January because it makes sense to have a chunkier gauge at that time of year. Again, like I could release a 16 stitch gauge pattern in March, but it doesn't quite feel, I feel at that point you're starting to think about lighter weight sweaters. And a raglan, because I've not knit a raglan now since this shows you how long it's been since I made a raglan. Alder, which is like last year October. So I kind of feel like I'm overdue a raglan. Like it's time for a raglan, and so that's why I decided it was gonna be a raglan. Okay, after my rib switches, what did I have? Oh, do I only wear my own designs? I do not only wear my own designs. At the moment though, I'm mostly only knitting my own designs. And I'd like that to change. But I think that if I knit other designers' designs, I'm gonna find interesting ways of wording things. I'm gonna find, like it's good to be on top of the market, like to know what other designers are doing. But I think I want it to be designers doing interesting constructions. So I think petite knit is always doing something a bit more interesting, but I don't just want to churn out petite knit patterns. I think what's hard now is I see a pattern and I think I could just work that out. Like I could just knit that. I don't need to buy the pattern to know how that's made. But I do want to be knitting more designer designs. So my call to action here is if you have knit designs, particularly like really good basics from a designer that you think's doing things a little bit differently, can you let me know down below? And I might try and see if like maybe once or twice, maybe like once a quarter or like once every 6 months, I'm knitting someone else's designs. I recently had my Lunan Polo test knit and Tori of Tori Knits NYC, is that her handle? Did my design, and she's a prolific designer. And I was really like impressed. I was like, you're in the middle of designing and you're knitting one of my patterns. You're test knitting a pattern, and she thinks she's testing it for Sari Nordland and stuff a lot. So a lot of respect to her for that. And I would like to be someone who knits other people's designs. Maybe not as test knits, but in general. So if you've got designers that you think this is a designer who's doing things really interestingly, particularly with construction, please let me know down below and I will start looking at what ones I want to make. Okay, so my swatches are kind of in 3 batches. My second batch of swatches then is what I'm planning to cast on after, because you know, that's how we're thinking at the moment. And I am missing a bunch of these. There we go. So these are all broken rib. So interestingly, this is the Sockle yarn that I bought at Rhinebeck. So I tried that one first and it's not quite what I want. This is Kent DK from Bare Naked Wools, also not quite what I wanted. Then I tried the 5/0. The gauge was actually quite interesting, but it's huge. But it was an interesting gauge, but I wasn't sold on it. And then I tried these 2 Isire Jensen. I mentioned there's some yarns I want to try. Jensen is one of them. And one of these is knit with a strand of alpaca, and one of them is knit with a strand of Highland. This is the alpaca on top and the Highland on the bottom. I decided I like they look so similar right now, but there's quite a big difference. One is more orange and one is more red. And this feels slightly softer, the Highland, which is interesting. I thought the alpaca would be softer. All that to say, this is what we're going with. Not as firm. So the further in the distance they are, the less concrete the decision is in my head. The more questions I have to answer, the more swatching I have to do, the more thinking I have to do. The current plan is saddle shoulder, Henley, with a hoodie option. I'm saying this, I sound ridiculous, but I really want to do a saddle shoulder construction. I've got another design for like April that's going to be saddle shoulder, but I like the idea of doing a saddle shoulder. And I want it to be top down, but I don't want to do drop shoulder again. So top down, saddle shoulder. And I think the saddles are going to be so fun to do. I think it's going to work really well in this design, this stitch pattern. And then I want to do, I really want to knit a Henley. That is a trend. Like there's something that I think right now people are knitting a lot of Henleys. I want a Henley because I've seen a lot of designers making them. So a Henley, so the Henley being like, it's round and it's kind of like a polo shirt, but without the polo collar. I don't know if there are different definitions of a Henley, so that's what I'm calling a Henley. But then I was like, oh, I could also do a round neck, and then I was like, how cool would a hoodie be? So now I have to, my next thing now is like, how big is the saddle? How's the short rows gonna work at the front and back? Like, how's that gonna work? And then my next question is gonna be, how do I knit a hood? So I'm gonna go look for some free patterns. That's my first stop, is like, who is knit like not for like sweaters with hoods, but for hoods. Understand the construction methods. I already started that, and actually there's a really great Two of Wands who does a lot of incredible free patterns, including a really good wrap cardigan that was the wrap cardigan I almost knit instead of designing one, but it's a raglan. Has some really great free patterns and has made I think the Autumn League pullover is the famous one, but there's a spring, I think called Spring League pullover, and it's got a hood. So I had to read through that to like understand the general construction of it, and that is currently that's taking up that next slot, and it's going to be saddle shoulder. Okay, do I have another question here? I feel like I'm getting faster, which I don't really want to do, but oh, and so yeah, the question was, how do I decide what construction to use? Sometimes it's a gut feeling. Sometimes I'm like, this design has to be this construction. Sometimes it's thinking like, I feel like I'm overdue a raglan. I feel there's a raglan coming and I should start making a raglan. So now I'm thinking, okay, what would work with our raglan? Sometimes there are constructions I really want to try. So this year I made the Rue. It was a contiguous construction. My wrap cardigan is a set-in sleeve. I really wanted to design a set-in sleeve. I've got some saddle shoulder patterns. I've knit a saddle shoulder sweater before. I designed almost an entire saddle shoulder sweater way back when I was designing very early on, and I thought it was too basic. Like I don't think it added anything to the market, so I didn't continue with it. It's still in a whip basket somewhere. So sometimes it's like I'm overdue a certain design or a certain construction. Sometimes this is definitely what works for this garment and it's just a vibe. And sometimes it's, okay, I want to do a new construction. How am I going to be doing that one? And like, what's the construction going to be like? Okay, and my very last set of swatches are all cables. I feel like once a year I do a cable knit. Once a year I do a colourwork knit. I don't know, it's not really true because I've already done, oh, the rain has gotten so heavy. But right now we're in cable land, and so here are just a couple of my cable swatches. So this is the cable that I was really invested in, and I think I'm still going to do this at some point, but this might end up being like this might all get cast on for, so right now we're talking about my March pattern. So right now, January is the varied rib, February is the Henley hoodie, and this is March. So this is a stitch pattern I really like. I struggled a lot to find a yarn that I think worked. So I really like this one, but I don't think it screamed the texture well enough. So I tried a few different ones to try and get the stitch definition I wanted. And I landed on this. Yeah, this is the one I landed on, which actually is not popping at all on camera, but it does pop on my actual camera. I do sometimes take pictures of my swatches with my phone. The majority of my marketing is social media. So if a stitch pattern is not popping on camera, it's probably not the right yarn to use for that design, because it's not going to sell the pattern. Just another part considered. But then I'm kind of getting distracted by other cables right now. So this is the same, like I think March will be a cable, but like what kind of cable I'm not sure. I swatched this a while back. I love this, I think it's so cool. I actually swatched it and then like left it curled up unblocked because I was convinced it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. So yesterday I blocked it, and I actually think it's really interesting. And again, I have feelings that whatever this is going to be is going to be a raglan. Just feels like it. And then this is like my mega swatch that I knit yesterday, which I only knit half of. I guess this way around. Oh yeah, you can tell it's still wet because it's flopping around all over the place. And so they would go out and then come back in again. So I'm feeling like maybe one of these two might overtake my, like this. I think it's really cool. So yeah, maybe one of these two, but I don't need to worry, like that's the thing, I don't need to think about that until a while away. So I'm just gonna leave that. If I force myself to make a decision, it's gonna be the wrong one, or I'm gonna get confused about it or a bit stressed about it, so I'm just not gonna think about it. I've knit these swatches. I will continue to knit swatches when I have the inspiration. Like I say, I knit this one like literally yesterday, and we'll just keep going with ideas and see what happens. And as the deadline comes closer, it starts to firm itself up in my brain. My very last question, my battery's about to run out, so let's see if I can get through this. My very last questions then were about like grading and resources. So I do not grade all my patterns. I started grading all my own patterns, and I now use my wonderful tech editor to do almost all my grading. She's done all my grading for my last, like, at least the last 5. Probably more than that. Sometimes I feel guilty saying that. Like if I'm not doing my own grading, I'm not a real designer. but I know I can grade. I just know she's going to do a better job. And what I was finding is that I would sit on a pattern for like weeks and weeks because I was too scared, not scared, but like I was putting off the grading. So I just reached out to her. She did the grading for my Cargill Junior, so I knew she did grading because I wanted to grade a kid's pattern. And I was like, hey, like, what is your grading process? And so now she grades, and then I have a second tech editor called Sue. So my first grader is called Rebecca, and my grader is called Rebecca, and my tech editor is called Sue. And between them, we get good patterns out. And it's really great because things like, I don't have a big chest, so I don't ever need bust shaping, but she's done a whole course on bust shaping, so of course she's going to do better bust shaping than I could ever imagine. So yeah, there are definitely some patterns I could grade them all myself. There are definitely some that are much easier to grade that sometimes I think I should just grade this one myself, but I like doing it. I like sending it to her. I like doing the parts that I like, and I think something that I realised is that if I'm going to have a full-time job and design patterns, I need to make it as seamless as possible for myself, and I need to do the parts that I love. And the parts that I love are the pattern development, the test knits, the marketing. I don't love the grading, and so if I can outsource that part, I will. That being said, I do know how to grade, so a couple of resources. I think that Sister Mountain has some really, really great things out there. I think the Isolde size chart is a really great place to go. And there's an incredible book called the Handy Knitter's Guide, or the Knitter's Handy Guide to Top-Down Sweaters, which I think is an incredible place to start if you are dabbling your feet in a new construction. It is where I've gone for new construction in the past. So if I'm starting for my set-in sleeves, that's where I went to, and I read through the entire thing, the whole section and all the patterns, and then I thought, okay, I now understand the construction of this. And it basically gives a guide for how to knit. There are 5 different constructions, and it has like 7 gauges, and it has the stitch number, the stitch counts for all of them. The patterns are super dated, and in my opinion, they're very dated, but the methods still work. So there's like a modified drop shoulder, there's a round yoke, there's a raglan, there's a set-in sleeve, and I think there's another one. So I would definitely recommend that one. That's also a really nice place to start. And there are lots of courses out there. There are people who you can pay to teach you, which if you're taking it seriously and want to go ahead and do it, that's definitely not a bad thing to do. And there are of course tech editors out there, so if you want to design patterns but don't want to grade them, there are people who will grade them for you. Again, it's an investment, so if it's your first pattern and you don't know if it's going to sell and you don't want to lose money on it, that might not be an option, but it's definitely worth considering. And there'll be people who will like hold your hand through it, so you can send it to them and they can give you some feedback and things like that. I think the tech editing going rate is about £30 an hour. That might vary depending on where you are. And I think a really great tip for learning how to grade is to take a pattern that you own from a designer that you trust, have an understanding of what all the numbers are for your size and how they correspond to your size chart. So like, if there are 200 stitches around the bust, this is this size bust. If there's this, and then try grading the numbers for a larger or a smaller size based on the same size chart, to understand that like, okay, if this size is this size chest and has this number of stitches, then I know the gauge, how many stitches should there be for this size? And then start connecting the dots. So if I know the cast on number and I know the chest size, how am I increasing to get there? If it's a raglan top down, for example. And then you can check the pattern and see what they've done. It's best with basics that don't have stitch patterns. I mean, you could then try it with stitch patterns. It always gets more complicated when you add a stitch pattern, because then you kind of have restraints, like, oh, I have to make sure it all works with repeats of 6 or repeats of 10 or repeats of 4 or whatever. But I think that's a very, very good way. It's basically like doing past papers for exams, but it's a great way of understanding how a designer that you trust would handle that pattern and run from there. So yeah, I think those are all my questions. I feel like I sped up at the end when I suddenly realised I've been talking for an hour plus, but this is actually really nice. I'm at the tail end of like a slightly, I want to say manic, and I don't know if that is an appropriate thing to say because I know that manic is an actual health condition, but it feels like it's been a bit of a manic period in that I've been it's all ideas and it's all, my brain has just been like, and when I've started just to like land on some things, like that's an option, this is an option. And as you can see, some of them, like the cables, are still like completely up in the air, but otherwise it's starting to like get a bit more concrete in my brain, and that is definitely how it feels like. As I'm coming closer to things, they're becoming more clear, like they're fuzzy, and then as I get closer, they're clearer. And that's where I'm at right now. And this is also these are some very recent decisions, especially like the rib and the Henley, and it also feels a bit weird telling you about things that are that far away. Some designers don't do it because they're just, someone else might just take the design. I just don't think that's going to happen, but it feels weird talking about them when they're no more than a swatch. So yeah, that is my brain at the moment. I hope you've enjoyed. I've actually really liked doing this. It's been really, really fun. Sitting down having a chat. I am going to go, my tea is definitely cold, so I'm going to finish my tea, edit the video and get it uploaded. Probably take a nap because we woke up at 5 o'clock with puppy and I'm going out tonight and need to be awake past 10 p.m. And then I'm going to sit and do some knitting for the rest of my afternoon. I hope you have a wonderful time. Please, if you want to take advantage of the discount code, make sure to do so. It will run out on the 26th of August, my birthday, at midnight, so use it before then. I will hopefully be back next week with a regular podcast episode. It'll be my very last podcast from this house. I cried when I realised that the other day. And until then, happy knitting.